Street Fighter 6 is not the first game to debut the ink and paint effects that were featured so heavily in the most recent trailer. Fans are going to call back immediately to Street Fighter 4 and feel that wave of nostalgia and that rush for all the effects that Capcom put in there, and that is something that they're trying to capture here. That's something that's very important to the franchise, is to recapture that feeling of nostalgia and energy. The ink and paint effects are not only stylish and look great, but they serve a gameplay purpose as well, where if you see the ink fly out of your opponent, you know you've drained some of their drive gauge, or if you're able to score a hit where the ink flies out, you know you've gained some back. The developers have confirmed that managing your meter in Street Fighter 6 is one of the most important aspects in the entire game. You need to understand how this mechanic works, and you need to use it at a high level to win consistently. Fans remember the first time they stomped on a Gooba's head as Mario, or the first time they slashed a knight with Link's sword in Zelda. These are callback moments that you want to feel reverberate throughout these games again. These moments are very important to nail visually, but also you want them to feel satisfying and fun. That is such an important part of why we play video games. Other callbacks exist in the Street Fighter 6 trailer. As we can see here, the opening screen has a Capcom logo that fades into graffiti, which is a direct callback to Street Fighter 1, where the same thing happened. Although Street Fighter V was not a beloved game in the community, people were very hyped about the Arcade Edition trailer that launched about halfway through the game. It featured fighters like Ryu and Chun-Li on a stage in a kind of a movie presentation. It was quite a bit different than what we were used to seeing these characters portrayed as, and they brought this back for Street Fighter 6. As you can see here with Ryu, Chun-Li, Jamie, and Luke, they all have much more of a presentation or movie quality build up to hype up the game. Even though Street Fighter V was not well thought of overall by many people, it's nice to see Capcom is bringing back stuff that people did enjoy about the game so that this can reverberate with fans of the previous game and now the new one as well. Next, I want to get into something I'm calling Catalyst Log, where I document my experiences playing Street Fighter and share tips with people on how to improve. I keep on the inputs and the frame data, shoutouts to Punk, so it's a little bit easier to keep up with everything. If you have questions like did I press a button when I was minus or anything like that, just to make it a little easier to follow along with. The goal here is while I level up, I can share advice and tips on how I'm going about doing so. Getting right into it, 2D fighting games are all about controlling space. The very worst spot to be at in any 2D fighter, like the Street Fighter franchise, is where your character is disadvantaged. Check out this image, which shows you the spots on screen you generally want to be controlling space at with Rose. This is where you want to be standing at if you're fairly competent at controlling space and don't lose to random jump-ins and dash-ups and other things of this nature. On the other end of the spectrum, this is where I lose most to Alex players, and it's when he's within range of his amazing lariat and previously mentioned crouching medium punch button, which is an absolute favorite button for Alex players to use to activate his very powerful V-triggers. You can see from the footage here, I'm trying to keep myself at a distance where Rose is highly effective against Alex. From this range, a number of grapplers in Street Fighter V can really struggle to get inside. The Alex player of course activates on his crouching medium punch, which is a tough thing to avoid, but he's not able to stay in consistently after doing so, which is where he truly wants to be. Alex generally has to take risks and put himself in situations where he's negative on block to make headway against me, and while I'm not dealing as much damage as Alex can drain if he gets in, it all adds up on this Alex player. I'm playing to my character's strengths and taking advantage of my opponent's weaknesses. When playing as Rose, Luke is also best fought from a distance, but not typically as far out as you would fight Alex, as Luke has some of the best whiff punish normals in the entire game, and Rose is extremely whiff punishable if she doesn't make contact with her normals. Where Luke players want to be in this match is at the aforementioned whiff punish range, are somewhat up in your face so he can repeatedly pound away at the opponent with his +2 on block back plus medium punch attack. Luke also has a tremendous crouching medium kick attack that reaches a deceptively long distance and leads into a ton of great options for him. A common tactic with Luke players against Rose is to stand just outside of her stand heavy punch range and whiff punish her, as I've mentioned before. As such, you'll only want to do standing heavy punch for the most part at ranges where it will not whiff. This takes away one of Luke's key strengths in Street Fighter V. Having some idea of what buttons your opponent is going to press and when and why will help you understand a matchup tremendously and lead to a lot more wins. Also, if the Luke player wants to back up to full screen, Rose's air fireball can give him fits as it traverses over his normal fireballs and will sock him right in the face for his troubles. Couple this with Rose's Soul Punish orbs and her normal fireballs, and Luke players generally cannot outzone Rose. Zoning out Luke in this way will often cause a player to lose their patience and try and charge in with his normals and jumps, which, if you're ready for him, will enable you to lop off huge portions of his life bar. Controlling space in 2D fighting games is paramount, but the key word here is controlling. You just can't stand at these ranges and do nothing, you have to actively defend them and guard against what your opponent is doing as well. You need to know what options you have available to your character, and sometimes more importantly, what options your opponent has at any given time to really start to pile up the wins. Practice makes perfect, and even the best players alive will drop their combos and setups, but they rarely have this happen to them, and that's what helps separate these players from the rest of the field. Don't get overly frustrated when you struggle to replicate a combo or setup you're working on at first. Simply keep playing the match and realize that these things will come with time. You don't want to compare yourself too much to players like IDOM or Punk, and instead focus on the progress you are making as an individual. You just want to see yourself improving, and with time, all these things will add up. Also, sometimes you get a bit lucky and win despite not playing all that well, like I did here. Yeehaw, I did it. Guile is a character who Rose outzones, generally speaking. He can do quite a few things to try and keep up at that range, but it's usually going to be a losing battle for him against Rose's superior zoning. You can see I'm hitting this Guile player with standing heavy punch, but not canceling into my fireball every time because I know it's not a true block string, and I assume the Guile player, being super diamond rank, knows this as well, and will attempt to flash kick the startup of my projectile as it's not a true block string from this specific range. And then I successfully bait this out and take the match for the Guile player's trouble. At this point, the Guile player becomes fairly reckless and opens the match with a raw jump in, which I'm ready for. Tilted players are also much more likely to tech throw, as he did here as well. It's a common thing in Street Fighter V where if you take a round in convincing fashion, a lot of players are going to try and unleash chaos by doing something right at the start of the round, like a jump in or attack. Be ready for this. You can see at this point in the match, the Guile player is actually doing one heck of a job navigating my mind full of moves here and getting up close to me where he'd ideally like to be. If he hadn't wasted so much of his life and given me a lot of resources by charging in, he might have had a different result here, but ultimately, I was able to pull this one out.